Good morning and welcome to the Daily Prophet. My name is Nikki Muggles and my special guest is Whitfield Potter, the grandson of Harry Potter. Whitfield, it's great to have you with us here today.
Thank you for having me. I am excited to be here and love any opportunity to talk about my grandfather, Harry Potter.
Great, let's get started. Whitfield, I would like to spend today talking specifically about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Would that be okay?
That would be great, Miss Muggles. I think we should start by talking about my grandfather's childhood and the events that led up to the discovery of the Sorcerer's Stone. After the death of his parents, my great-grandparents, Harry was sent to live with the terrible Dursleys. Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings. He was a large man with no neck and a very large mustache. Miss Dursley was thin and blonde and had a long neck, making up for what Mr. Dursley didn't have, and used it to her advantage when spying on neighbors or just being plain nosy. After he was left on the doorstep by Albus Dumbledore, I will get to him later, it was a miserable 10 years living with the Dursleys, living primarily in the dark cupboard under the stairs. Harry's cousin, Dudley, was the Dursleys' pride and joy. He was blonde like Miss Dursley and large like Mr. Dursley. His face was pink, no neck, and you would say his head was thick. Dudley disliked any form of exercise, unless of course it involved punching somebody, which usually was my grandfather. Now mind you, Harry was small and skinny for his age, kind of like me. His face was thin, eyes bright green, and hair black. He wore round glasses and had a very thin scar on his forehead that was shaped like a bolt of lightning. He didn't look it, but he was very fast, also kind of like me.
That doesn't sound like a very fun childhood. Would you say things really changed for Harry because of the letters from no one?
Yes, however, Harry actually getting the letters and reading it was a lot harder than you all may know. The Dursleys hid Harry away, so it did seem a bit odd he would receive any mail. I mean, who would even know his address, let alone that he lived in the cupboard under the stairs? It started out as one letter, and then turned into hundreds of letters. See, the Dursleys were keeping the letters from Harry, not allowing him to read it. And believed that they would stop coming if they just left their home on Privet Drive. It was not until the Dursleys escaped to the most miserable shack you could imagine, where Harry finally saw the letter and learned the truth about himself. As they were sleeping one night, a loud boom, like the sound of a cannon, was at the door, and there stood an angel. Not an angel like you and I might know, but an angel that would make everything in Harry's life better.
Who was this angel?
Hagrid, of course, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. Hagrid was a giant man whose face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard. His eyes were like black beetles, and he was basically a giant. He was the one who told Harry that he was a wizard, what really happened to Harry's parents, and who Voldemort was. Of course, saying the name Voldemort made everyone shudder.
Who is Voldemort, and what happened to him?
Good question. Disappeared, vanished. Same night he tried to kill Harry. Some say he died. No one knows for sure. But I can tell you, he didn't have enough human left in him to die. Some say he's still out there, biding his time.
Okay, he sounds scary, but we'll move on. Tell me the significance of Diagon Alley.
Diagon Alley was located in London, someplace Harry had never been before. He also had the most peculiar feeling that only he and Hagrid could see it. To enter Diagon Alley, Hagrid tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. As the bricks spread, they entered an archway onto a cobbled street that twisted and turned out of sight. This is where Harry really learned how famous he actually was, and where he purchased all of his supplies needed for Hogwarts, such as his wand, robe, cauldron, and let's not forget the best gift from Hagrid, Hedwig, his owl. Now some of you may know, one of the places Hagrid took Harry was Gringotts. a snowy white building that towered over all the other little shops, with burnished bronze doors. Goblins were everywhere, walking around the vast marble halls, leading toward narrow stone passageways lit with flaming torches. This is where Vault 713, with no keyhole, was, and where Hagrid picked up the grubby little package wrapped up in brown paper, which we come to know later as the Sorcerer's Stone.
Wow, how exciting. But before we talk about the Sorcerer's Stone, we need to talk about Hogwarts, since several important events seem to really lead up to that moment. Let's first start with the train ride.
The journey from platform 9 3/4 was where Harry met two of his closest friends, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. Ron was the sixth Weasley to go to Hogwarts. He was tall, thin, and gangling, with freckles, big hands and feet, and a long nose. Hermione had a bossy sort of voice, lots of brown hair, and rather large front teeth. She spoke fast and was definitely a know-it-all. I'm sure you know one of those.
We all do. What was Harry's first impression of Hogwarts?
When Hagrid met the first years to take them down the narrow path to the edge of the great black lake was when they finally saw, perched atop a high mountain on the other side, its windows sparkling in the starry sky, a vast castle with many turrets and towers. It towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff where it stood. The curtain of ivy hid a wide opening in the cliff face, taking them underneath the castle, where they walked up the stone steps to the huge oak front door. The entrance hall was so big, the stone walls were lit with flaming torches like the ones at Gringotts. The ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase led to the upper floors. There were 142 staircases, doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely. People and portraits would visit each other, and Harry was sure that coats of armor could walk. This was the world of magic Harry had never known, which stood right before him.
What was the significance of the sorting hat?
Sorting was a very important ceremony while Harry was at Hogwarts, because the house they were assigned to was something like your family within Hogwarts. Harry would have classes with the others in the house, sleep in the house dormitory, and spend free time in the common space of the house. The four houses were Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin. Harry quickly learned that each house had its own noble history, and each had produced outstanding witches and wizards. When it was Harry's turn to place the hat on his head, he prayed and hoped that it would not be Slytherin, and to his relief and surprise, it was Gryffindor. Same house as his new friend Ron and soon-to-be friend Hermione.
Soon-to-be friend Hermione? What do you mean?
There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them. For the sake of time, let's just say from Halloween and that moment on, Hermione became one of their best friends.
How does Nicholas Flamel enter into the story? Why is he so important?
Well, we can't talk about him first without talking about Albus Dumbledore. Remember, I said I would get back to him. Albus Dumbledore was considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times, particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work in alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. He wore half-moon glasses, had a long, crooked nose, and flowing silver hair, beard, and mustache. This idea of Nicholas Flamel had really consumed Ron, Hermione, and Harry. Ever since Hagrid let it slip about him in the Sorcerer's Stone, the three of them thought for sure this is what Snape was involved in. What they couldn't figure out was how Flamel was connected to Snape, what exactly did Snape know, and who really was Nicholas Flamel. It wasn't until Hermione solved the case from some of her light reading. She pulled out a book where it stated that Nicholas Flamel was the only known maker of the Sorcerer's Stone. The Sorcerer's Stone was a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. Now there had been many reports of the Sorcerer's Stone over the centuries, but the only stone currently in existence belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel. The Mr. Nicholas Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday at the time and was enjoying a quiet life with his wife, Devon, 658.
Sounds like they finally solved the mystery of what was in the small package that Hagrid picked up from Gringotts and that Snape seemed to be after. I mean, who wouldn't want to turn everything into gold and stay young forever? The question is, how did they keep Snape away from it? How did they protect the Sorcerer's Stone?
This brings us through the trap door. Once Hagrid mistakenly revealed how to get past Fluffy, the three-headed dog keeping guard of the trap door, Harry, Ron, and Hermione knew they needed to capture the Sorcerer's Stone before Snape could get to it. Doing this proved to be much harder than they anticipated. The first challenge was getting past Fluffy. Harry knew that playing a bit of music would put Fluffy right to sleep and he wouldn't awaken until the music stopped. So Harry placed the flute Hagrid gave him to his lips and blew. Fluffy's eyes began to droop, growls ceased, fell to its knees, and slumped to the ground, fast asleep. Then they were able to open the trap door. One by one, they dropped through the trap door and landed on what they thought was a plant.
Was it?
Yes, but not a friendly one. The plant twisted snake-like tendrils around their ankles, and the more they fought against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. Luckily, Hermione, from all of her readings, knew that it was Devil's Snare and was able to use her wand to reverse the curse and pull Ron and Harry free.
Now were they able to get the Sorcerer's Stone?
They still had to get through the locked door to the next chamber. By finding the correct key, they needed a big old-fashioned one, silver, like the handle. What they thought were birds flying around, they realized were really keys. But not to worry, Harry was the youngest secret in a century for Quidditch, which sure came in handy right about now. As they jumped on their broomsticks and circled in the big one with bright blue wings, feathers crumpled on one side, Harry streaked after it, pinned it against the stone with one hand, then placed the key into the lock, and it clicked open, which led them to the next chamber, where they were standing on the edge of a huge chessboard behind the black chessmen, which were all taller than they were, and carved from what looked like black stone. Facing them, way across the chamber, were the white pieces. Because Ron was good at chess, and Harry nor Hermione were that great, Ron called out the moves, and then sacrificed himself to be taken to leave Harry free to checkmate the king. Once the White King took off his crown and threw it at Harry's feet, the chessmen parted and bowed, leaving the door ahead clear for Harry and Hermione to enter through.
Now do they get the Sorcerer's Stone?
No, they must next pass through the black flames. Luckily, Hermione not only read a lot of books, but she was also clever and was able to determine what bottles to drink. As she drank the bottle that would allow her to get past the purple flames so she could get back to Ron and send Hedwig to send a letter to Dumbledore, Harry took a deep breath and picked up the smallest bottle, which was like ice flooding through his body. But then he found himself on the other side of the chamber, in the last chamber.
What did he find?
There was already someone there, but it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. It was the man with two faces.
The man with two faces?
Yes, Quirrell. Quirrell revealed that Harry had it all wrong, and that Snape was actually trying to protect him as a favor to Harry's father, despite the fact Snape loathed him while at Hogwarts. Quirrell also muttered to Harry that the Mirror of Erised was his key to finding the stone, and Harry was going to help him.
You mentioned the man with two faces. Explain.
As Quirrell talked to his master, Harry was horrified that the voice that responded seemed to also come from Quirrell. As the voice asked Quirrell to speak face to face with Harry, Quirrell began to unwrap his turban, and where there should have been the back of his head, there was a face, the most terrible face Harry had ever seen. It was chalk white with glaring red eyes and slits of nostrils, like a snake.
What happens next?
Voldemort explains to Harry that he is a mere shadow and vapor. He only has form when he can share another's body, and there have always been those willing to let him into their hearts and mind. Unicorn blood has strengthened him, and once he has the elixir of life, he will be able to create a body of his own. As Voldemort and Quirrell attempted to take the stone from Harry that had been slipped into his pocket while looking through the mirror of Erised, Harry realized that Quirrell couldn't touch his bare skin without suffering terrible pain. Harry knew his only chance was to keep hold of Quirrell, keep him in enough pain to stop him from doing a curse. As Harry and Quirrell fought, Harry suddenly saw something gold appear. It wasn't the snitch that he was used to catching while playing Quidditch, but a pair of glasses on the smiling face of Albus Dumbledore.
Did Dumbledore save him?
Yes. Dumbledore got back in time to pull Quirrell off Harry, but Harry did not recall that. See, when Harry saw something gold appear, he was actually in the hospital wing. Dumbledore had to tell Harry what happened, including that the stone had been destroyed, and that Nicholas Flamel was in agreement that was best for everyone. Dumbledore and Harry then began to talk about Voldemort, and that he is still out there somewhere, perhaps looking for another body to share. And not being truly alive, he cannot be killed. Voldemort did leave Quirrell to die, which shows he has just as little mercy for his followers as his enemies.
What do you think was the lesson Harry learned in the end?
What Dumbledore taught Harry was, if there's one thing Voldemort could not understand, it is love. He doesn't realize that love, as powerful as Harry's mother for him, leaves its own mark, not a scar, no visible sign, but to have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved Harry was gone, will give him some protection forever. Quirrell, full of hatred and greed, could not touch Harry for this reason. It was agony to touch a person. It was agony to touch a person marked by something so good.
Whitfield, this is really a beautiful story in the end. Looks like you learned a lot about what's really important.
Yes, love from Harry's parents, friendship from Ron, Hermione, Hagrid, and Dumbledore, the truth, bravery, and courage in the end conquered all.
A special thanks to our guest, Whitfield Potter. This ends this edition of the Daily Prophet. Until next time, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind.